The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly was the largest structure ever built by intelligent life. It floated in the empty space between three star systems, a massive ring of metal and crystal where the 12 ruling species of the galaxy came to make decisions. Thousands of delegates filled the curved seats that rose up like a stadium, their bodies of every shape and color imaginable. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few had no solid form at all. In the center of this great hall stood a small human woman named Park. She was 43 years old, with black hair pulled back in a simple style, and a plain gray suit that looked boring compared to the bright colors worn by the alien delegates around her. She had been Earth's ambassador to the Assembly for 7 years. In all that time, no one had taken her seriously. Humans were the species in the galaxy. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 300 years ago, which made them bobbies compared to civilizations that had ruled the stars for millions of years. They had 12 small colony worlds. They had trading ships and science vessels. What they did not have, everyone knew, was a military. And that was why the Assembly was laughing at her. "You are asking us for protection," High Counselor Al said, his long neck bending down toward her from his raised platform. He was a reptilian species with scales that glowed different colors based on his emotions. Right now, they glowed pink with amusement. "Against the Dominion. They have sent a formal declaration," said calmly. "They intend to absorb our colony worlds into their empire. We are asking the Assembly to invoke the Mutual Defense Agreement." More laughter rippled through the hall. The Mutual Defense Agreement was meant for species that could defend themselves but needed temporary help. It was not meant for species that had nothing to offer in return. "Ambassador Park," said another counselor, a massive creature named who represented the Hollow Kings, "your species made a choice 2 centuries ago. You disbanded your military forces. You have no warships. You have no soldiers. You have... What exactly?" "We have emergency responders," said. The laughter grew louder. "They have conquered 47 worlds," Al said, his scales now flickering orange with impatience. "Their hive soldiers number in the trillions. Each one is born for war, engineered for combat from the moment it hatches. They do not negotiate. They do not accept surrender. They consume everything in their path and add it to their empire." "I am aware of their history," said. "Then you understand that your emergency responders will not stop them." Al's tone was not cruel, simply practical. "We are sorry, Ambassador, truly, but the Assembly cannot sacrifice our own forces to defend a species that refused to defend itself. If you had built warships, trained soldiers, prepared for the realities of this galaxy." He spread his 4 arms in a gesture of helplessness. "You did not. That was your choice. Now you must live with it." The vote was quick. 12 species, 12 votes against. Humanity would receive no help. Park gathered her documents and walked out of the great hall with her head held high. She did not argue. She did not beg. She simply left, and the Assembly moved on to other business, already forgetting about the small, weak species that would soon be absorbed into the Dominion. 3 days later, the Armada arrived at 442. The system contained one habitable planet, a world slightly larger than Earth with vast plains of purple grass and 3 small oceans. The humans had named it New, after a city on there. 40 million people lived there, mostly farmers who grew food that was shipped to other human colonies. Admiral Al stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the Devourer of Worlds, and looked at the planet on his. His body was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in black armor that was actually part of his flesh. His head was a nightmare of mandibles and compound eyes that could see in spectrums no human could imagine. He had conquered 11 worlds personally. He had killed millions, and now he would add this small, defenseless colony to his collection. "Scan the system," he ordered. His voice was a deep clicking sound that his translator converted to words. "Scanning," replied one of his officers. "1 orbital station, No weapons detected, no warships, no defense platforms. The station is broadcasting a message. Let me hear it. A human voice filled the bridge, speaking in calm, measured tones. This is Colonel of the United Earth Emergency Response Corps. You are entering protected human space. You have 1 standard hour to withdraw your forces. This is your only warning. Al's mandibles clicked together in what passed for laughter among his species. 1 station, 1 human, and he gives us a warning. He turned to his tactical officer. How many ships do we have? 800,000 combat vessels, Admiral. 12 million ground troops ready for deployment. And they have 1 station. Al settled back in his command chair, thoroughly amused. Send no response. Begin approach. We will show them what happens to species that think warnings will stop The massive fleet moved forward, 800,000 ships arranged in a formation that blotted out the stars. It was the largest force that had ever assembled for a single conquest, and Al had brought it here not because he needed it, but because he wanted to send a message to the rest of the galaxy. This is what happens when you are weak. On the orbital station, Colonel watched the fleet approach. He was 51 years old with gray hair cut short and a face lined by decades of service. He had never fired a weapon in combat. None of his people had. Humans did not have soldiers. But they had something else. Opened a secure channel to the planet's surface. Director Han, this is Colonel, authorization code Typhoon 7. A woman's voice responded immediately. Authorization confirmed. What are your orders, Colonel? Took a deep breath. For 300 years, humanity had hoped this moment would never come. They had built a peaceful society, focused on cooperation and growth. They had told the galaxy they had no military because they did not believe in war. They had not told the galaxy the whole truth. Activate Civilian Integration Protocol, said. All sectors, full mobilization. Understood, may the stars watch over us. And may our enemies learn what we truly are. Closed the channel and watched the fleet grow larger on his screen. 800,000 warships, 12 million soldiers. He almost felt sorry for them. 300 years ago, humanity almost destroyed itself. The Third World War lasted only 6 weeks, but in those 6 weeks, nuclear fire burned across every continent. 2 billion people died. Great cities became craters of glass and ash. The oceans were poisoned. The sky turned gray with dust that blocked out the sun for years. When the survivors crawled out of their shelters, they looked at what they had done and made a decision. Never again. Humanity would never again allow itself to build the machinery of mass destruction. There would be no more armies, no more weapons of war, no more soldiers trained to kill. But humans were not stupid. They knew the universe was vast and full of dangers they had not yet discovered. They knew that someday something might come from the stars that wanted to hurt them, and so they made a plan. They called it the Integration Protocol. Every human, starting at age 18, went through 5 years of mandatory service, but it was not military service. It was called emergency response training. They learned medicine. They learned engineering. They learned logistics and communication and disaster management. They learned how to save lives, how to rebuild after catastrophe, how to work together as a single coordinated unit. What they did not know, what most of them never discovered, was that hidden inside their training were other skills. Combat tactics disguised as crowd control, weapons handling disguised as tool operation, military strategy disguised as resource management. The instructors knew, the government knew, but the average citizen simply thought they were learning how to respond to earthquakes and plagues and industrial accidents. They did not realize they were being trained for war. Until the day that came. On the surface of Nu, 40 million people received the same message at the same moment. It appeared on their personal devices, on public screens, on every communication system on the planet. Emergency protocol, hostile invasion imminent. Civil defense integration ACTIVATED. Report 2 DESIGNATED coordination points. This is not a drill. For a moment, nothing happened. People stood frozen, staring at the words, trying to understand what they meant. Then something clicked. Farmer Lee was standing in his rice field when the message came. He was 62 years old and had spent most of his life growing food. He had not thought about his emergency training in decades, but as he read the words, memories began to surface. Training scenarios he had forgotten, skills he did not know he possessed. His hands moved without conscious thought. He walked to his equipment shed and opened a panel that he had never noticed before. Inside was a weapon, a military-grade plasma rifle, and a set of tactical armor. He did not remember putting them there. He did not remember learning how to use them, but his hands remembered everything. Across the planet, the same scene repeated 40 million times. Teachers who had spent their lives educating children found themselves organizing defensive positions with perfect military precision. Engineers who built bridges and power plants suddenly knew how to construct fortifications. Doctors transformed into combat medics. Cooks became logistics officers. And the elderly, those too old to fight, moved to communication centers hidden beneath every major city. Their job was coordination. They would be the voices that connected everyone together, turning 40 million individuals into a single fighting force. Director Han stood in the primary command center beneath News Capital City. She was 38 years old, and until today she had been the planetary administrator, responsible for agricultural quotas and trade agreements. Now she commanded the defense of an entire world. The strange thing was, she knew exactly what to do. All sectors report, she ordered. Sector 1, mobilization complete. 14 million personnel ready. Sector 2, mobilization complete. 12 million personnel ready. Sector 3, mobilization complete. 14 million personnel ready. Nodded, 90 minutes. It had taken 90 minutes to transform a farming colony into a fortress. No professional army in the galaxy could mobilize that fast. But they were not a professional army. They were something far more dangerous. Above the planet, Admiral Al watched his tactical display with growing confusion. His ground sensors were detecting strange readings from the surface, energy signatures that had not been there before, structures that seemed to appear from nowhere. And the humans, the weak, defenseless farmers, were moving with a coordination that made no sense. "What are they doing?" he demanded. "Unknown, Admiral, they appear to be organizing." "Organizing for what? They have no weapons, no defenses." But even as he spoke, something changed. The planet's surface shimmered, and suddenly a network of energy shields flickered to life over every major population center. The shields were military-grade, powerful enough to withstand orbital bombardment. "Impossible," Al breathed. "Where did those come from?" "The shield generators were hidden beneath their agricultural facilities, Admiral. We did not detect them because they were powered down and disguised as farming equipment." Felt something he had never felt before. It was not fear, not yet, but it was close. Uncertainty. The humans had been hiding something. They had appeared weak, defenseless, pacifistic, and all along they had been preparing. "Begin bombardment," he ordered. "Maximum firepower, destroy those shields." The fleet opened fire. Thousands of energy beams lanced down toward the planet, enough firepower to crack continents. They struck the shields and splashed against them like water against stone. The shields held. "Increase power. All ships, focus fire on the capital city." More beams joined the assault. The shields flickered and groaned under the assault, but they did not break. On the surface, Han watched the energy readings climb. The shields were holding, but they would not last forever. They were buying time. Time for what, she did not know. Her training had only prepared her to defend until help arrived. And then the help arrived. Colonel's voice came through the command center speakers. "Director Han, look up." Switched her display to an orbital view. What she saw made her smile for the first time since the invasion began. Ships were emerging from faster-than-light travel all around the system. Not warships. At least, they did not look like warships. They looked like cargo freighters and mining vessels and science ships, civilian craft from human colonies across the sector. But as watched, the ships began to change. Hull plates retracted to reveal hidden weapons. Cargo bays opened to launch fighters. The civilian fleet transformed before her eyes into something else entirely. "All ships, this is captain of the transport vessel," a woman's voice broadcast across all channels. "Defense Protocol Omega is now active. Welcome to the party." Admiral Al stared at his tactical display as red icons across the screen. Enemy ships, hundreds of them, then thousands, appearing from nowhere, transforming from harmless traders into deadly warships. "What is this?" he demanded. "Where did they come from?" No one could answer him. No one in the galaxy had ever seen anything like this before. A species with no military had somehow produced a fleet from thin air. But the humans knew exactly what it was. It was the moment they stopped pretending. Captain had spent 15 years commanding the cargo ship. She had transported grain and machinery and medical supplies across human space. She had never fired a weapon in anger. She had never even thought of herself as a warrior. But as she guided her transformed vessel toward the fleet, she felt completely calm. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced ease, activating weapons systems she had trained on in simulations she barely remembered. The fear she expected to feel never came. Instead, there was only focus and clarity. Around her, 14 other ships from human colonies flew in loose formation. They were not military vessels. They had been built as freighters and miners and research platforms, but hidden within their structures were weapons and armor and systems designed for a single purpose: to defend humanity when all other options failed. "All ships," said her voice steady, "weapons free. Pick your targets and engage." The human fleet opened fire. Threw metal slugs at incredible speeds. Plasma cannons spat balls of superheated matter. Missiles launched from hidden bays and streaked toward the formation. The damage was immediate and devastating. Admiral Al watched in shock as 3 of his cruisers exploded in the first exchange. These were not the actions of desperate civilians. This was coordinated military assault from ships that moved and fought with purpose. "Return fire," he screamed. "Destroy them." The fleet turned its weapons on the human ships. Thousands of beams reached out to burn them from space. But the human vessels did not fly in predictable patterns. They did not follow the tactical doctrines they had studied and prepared for. They improvised. They rolled sideways as enemy fire passed through the space where it had been a moment before. Did not plan the maneuver consciously. She simply moved, responding to the flow of battle with instincts she did not know she had. And around her, every other human captain did the same. That was the secret the galaxy had never understood. Human emergency training was not about memorizing procedures. It was about developing instincts. Every human learned the same principles, practiced the same simulations, developed the same reflexes. They did not need to communicate their plans because any human could predict what another human would do in the same situation. The hive mind was powerful but required constant communication. Disrupt their signals, and their coordination broke down. Kill their commanders, and their soldiers became confused. Humans needed no signals. Their coordination was cultural, built into them from birth. They thought alike because they had been trained alike, and that made them deadlier than any army the galaxy had ever seen. On the planet's surface, the ground battle had begun. 12 million soldiers descended from orbit in drop pods that crashed into the purple fields of Nu. They were monsters designed for war, each one standing 3 meters tall with armor-plated skin and claws that could tear through metal. They had conquered dozens of worlds. They expected easy prey. They found something else entirely. Ground Commander Al led the assault on the capital city. His soldiers advanced in perfect formation, following the hive mind's commands with absolute obedience. The humans would be hiding in their buildings, terrified, waiting to die. Except they were not. The first sign of trouble came when Al's forward scouts simply vanished. One moment they were advancing through a residential district, the next they were gone. No sound, no signal, nothing, just silence. "Report," Al demanded through the hive link. "What happened to Forward Team 7? No response came. He sent another team to investigate. They found the bodies of the scouts, killed with precise shots to their weak points. The kind of shots that required intimate knowledge of anatomy. The kind of shots only trained military snipers could make. But there were no human soldiers, only civilians. Grandmother was 73 years old. She had operated a small restaurant in the capital city for 40 years, serving traditional Korean food to her community. She had, and great. She liked to garden and watch the sunset over the purple fields. Now she lay on her restaurant's rooftop with a plasma rifle in her hands, picking off soldiers with careful, methodical shots. Her granddaughter, 22 years old, crouched beside her, reloading weapons and calling out targets. Neither of them felt afraid. Their training had prepared them for this moment, even if they had not known it. "3 more coming around the corner," said, "left side." Shifted her aim and fired 3 times. 3 dropped. "The soup will get cold if we take too long," the old woman said calmly. "We need to finish this quickly." Across the city, similar scenes played out. Office workers ambushed patrols from windows. Farmers used their knowledge of the land to set traps. Teachers organized groups of defenders and directed them with hand signals and shouted commands. They had expected to fight an army. Instead, they found themselves fighting a city. Every building was a fortress. Every street was a kill zone. Every civilian was an enemy combatant who knew exactly where to shoot and when. Ground Commander Al's advance stalled within 6 hours. He had lost 40,000 soldiers, and he had not even reached the city center. "This is impossible," he reported to Admiral Al. "They fight like trained soldiers, but our intelligence says they have no military training. Every human we encounter is armed and coordinated. It is like fighting an entire army disguised as farmers and shopkeepers." Al's voice came back tense and angry. "Then burn the city, orbital strike, destroy everything." "We cannot, Admiral. Our ships are engaged with their fleet, and the shields over the city are still holding." In orbit, the battle had turned against the human fleet was smaller, but it was inflicting damage far beyond its size. Freighters rammed into cruisers, their reinforced hulls designed to survive the impact while crushing their enemies. Mining ships used their cutting lasers to slice through armor. Research vessels deployed experimental weapons that had been waiting decades for this moment. Admiral Al watched his fleet burning and felt something cold settle into his chest. His superior numbers meant nothing. His experience meant nothing. He was fighting an enemy that did not obey the rules of war because they were not soldiers. They were something new, something terrifying. Captain guided them through a gap in the formation, her weapons firing continuously. Around her, her crew worked with silent efficiency, each person knowing their role without being told. "Enemy flagship located," her sensor officer reported, "bearing 72 Mark IV. Smiled, "All ships form up on me. Let's go say hello to their admiral." The human fleet turned as one unit and accelerated toward the devourer of worlds. They did not need orders. They did not need communication. They simply knew what had to be done. And they were going to do it, Admiral Al had never experienced fear. They did not feel fear the way other species did. Their hive mind connected every soldier to every other soldier, creating a sense of unity that drowned out individual emotions. When one felt terror, a million others shared the burden, making it bearable. But now, standing on the bridge of his flagship as human ships surrounded him, Al felt something his species had no word for. It was cold and heavy in his chest. It made his hands tremble. It whispered to him that he had made a terrible mistake. Around the devourer of worlds, the remnants of his fleet were dying. Ships that had conquered dozens of planets exploded under the assault of vessels that had been cargo freighters 3 hours ago. The humans attacked without mercy, without hesitation, without the fear that should have paralyzed such a small force against such overwhelming odds. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, voice shaking, "we have lost 60% of our fleet. Ground forces report complete failure to advance. They are requesting extraction." Extraction. The word tasted bitter in Al's mouth. In 300 years of conquest, they had never retreated from a battlefield. They had never needed to. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They have no military. Our intelligence was clear. They are farmers and scientists and traders. They should not know how to fight." No one could answer him because no one understood what was happening. The galaxy had studied humanity for 3 centuries. They had observed their peaceful society, their cooperative nature, their apparent weakness. They had concluded that humans were harmless. They had been wrong. Lieutenant Commander Shin flew his fighter through the wreckage of a carrier, weaving between chunks of burning metal with casual skill. His communications had been jammed for 20 minutes, but he did not need them. He knew exactly where to go and what to do. That was the thing about human training. It did not just teach skills. It taught a way of thinking. Every human who went through emergency response learned the same principles, practiced the same scenarios, developed the same instincts. They did not need orders because any human could predict what another human would do in any situation. Knew that captain was leading the assault on the enemy flagship. He knew that ground forces were funneling soldiers into prepared kill zones. He knew this because it was what he would do, and every human thought the same way. His wing of 12 fighters formed up without communication, each pilot falling into position based on training they barely remembered receiving. They had been agricultural survey pilots this morning. Now they were weapons of war. Approaching enemy flagship, announced to no one in particular, his would already know, "Let's end this." On the surface of Nu, the ground assault had collapsed into chaos. Ground Commander Al stumbled through the streets of the capital city, his forces scattered and dying around him. The hive mind was fragmenting. Too many commanders had been killed. Too many communication nodes had been destroyed. Individual soldiers were becoming confused, isolated, afraid. The humans showed no such weakness. They moved through the city like ghosts, appearing from windows and doorways and rooftops to strike before vanishing again. They fought in small groups that coordinated perfectly without any visible communication. They knew the city intimately, every street, every building, every shadow where an ambush could be set. Because they lived here. This was their home, and they were defending it with a ferocity that Al had never encountered. A plasma bolt struck his shoulder, melting through his armor and burning into his flesh. He fell against a wall, clutching the wound, and looked up to see his attacker. It was a young woman, perhaps 20 years old by human standards. She wore civilian clothes splattered with blood and dirt. Her face was calm, almost peaceful, as she aimed her weapon at his head. "Wait," Al gasped, his translator converting his clicks and whistles into words. "Please, I surrender." The woman hesitated. Al felt hope rise in his chest. Humans were supposed to be merciful. They were supposed to be weak. "Your soldiers killed my little brother this morning," the woman said quietly. "He was 12 years old." She pulled the trigger. In orbit, Admiral Al made his final transmission to what remained of his fleet. All ships retreat, fall back to minimum safe distance. The words felt like acid on his tongue. Retreat. The Great Dominion, conquerors of 47 worlds, retreating from a single agricultural colony defended by farmers. His tactical officer looked at him with something like horror. Admiral, if we retreat, the home fleet will. I know what the home fleet will do, Al interrupted. But if we stay here, there will be no one left to face their judgment. Look at the display. Look at what is happening. The display showed the truth in brutal detail. Of 800,000 warships, fewer than 300,000 remained operational. The human fleet, still outnumbered 20-1, continued to press its attack, destroying ship after ship with methodical precision. The ground invasion had failed completely. 8 million soldiers were dead or captured. The survivors were being hunted through the streets by civilians who had been farming crops 12 hours ago. Admiral, a new voice cut through the chaos. It was Colonel, broadcasting from the orbital station that had started this nightmare. Your fleet is surrounded. Your ground forces are defeated. You have one opportunity to surrender. I suggest you take it. Stared at the human ships that circled his flagship like predators around wounded prey. They had won. Against all odds, against all reason, they had won. How? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. How did you do this? You have no military, you have no soldiers. You are farmers and traders and scientists. How? There was a long pause before answered. When he spoke, his voice was tired but firm. Admiral, we are all those things. We are farmers and traders and scientists. We are teachers and doctors and engineers. We are parents and children and grandparents. We are ordinary people who wanted nothing more than to live in peace. He paused. But we are also the descendants of a species that nearly destroyed itself through war. We learned from that mistake. We vowed never to build armies again, and we kept that vow. Then how? Al demanded. If you have no army, how did you defeat us? Because we realized something that the rest of the galaxy never understood, said. An army is a tool. It can be destroyed, disbanded, defeated. But a people who are trained to defend themselves, who carry the knowledge and skills and will to fight within every single citizen, can never be disarmed. Felt the cold weight in his chest grow heavier. You trained your entire population for war. We trained our entire population to survive, corrected. There is a difference. An army wants to conquer. A people defending their homes simply want to live. And there is nothing in this universe more dangerous than ordinary people fighting for their families. The Admiral's mandibles clicked slowly as he processed this information. The humans had not tricked the galaxy. They had not lied about being peaceful. They simply had not explained what their version of peace truly meant. Lower shields, Al ordered. Signal our surrender. His officers stared at him in disbelief, but they obeyed. The Dominion had been broken by farmers. The Galactic Assembly reconvened 3 weeks after the Battle of 442. The Great Hall felt different now. The casual conversations that usually filled the chamber before sessions were absent. The delegates of the 12 ruling species sat in uncomfortable silence, waiting for the meeting to begin. Ambassador Park walked to the center of the hall and took her place at the speaker's platform. She looked the same as she had 3 weeks ago, small, plain, unremarkable. But the way the other delegates looked at her had changed completely. High Counselor Al's scales were dim, showing no emotion at all. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Ambassador Park, the Assembly has reviewed the recordings from 442. We have questions. Of course, Counselor, said politely. I am happy to provide whatever information you require. The holographic display behind her activated, showing the aftermath of the battle. The images were terrible. Thousands of destroyed ships drifted in a field of debris that stretched across the system. On the planet's surface, cities that had been attacked showed the scars of intense combat, and everywhere the bodies of soldiers lay where they had fallen. The armada consisted of 800,000 vessels, Al said slowly. 12 million ground troops. According to our analysis, it was the largest invasion force assembled in the past 2,000 years. That is correct, confirmed. Your forces destroyed or captured 789,000 of those vessels. 11.3 million ground troops were killed or captured. Al's scales flickered with something that might have been fear. Your casualties were 847 military personnel and 2,341 civilians. The numbers hung in the air. The delegates stared at them, trying to make sense of what they represented. Ambassador Park said of the Hollow Kings, his voice clicking with agitation, 3 weeks ago, you stood in this hall and told us that humanity had no military. You asked for our help because you could not defend yourselves. I asked for your help, corrected gently. I never said we could not defend ourselves. I said we had no standing army. That was true. We still do not have a standing army. Then what do you call what happened at 442? Emergency response. The chamber erupted in confused murmuring, waited patiently for the noise to die down before continuing. 3 centuries ago, my species nearly destroyed itself through war. We killed 2 billion of our own people. We poisoned our planet. We came within a few years of total extinction. She paused, letting the words sink in. When the survivors rebuilt our civilization, they made a choice. We would never again maintain standing armies. We would never again train professional soldiers. We would never again build weapons for the purpose of conquest. And yet you defeated Al pointed out. Yes, because we found another way. His voice remained calm and level. We train every citizen in emergency response, medicine, engineering, disaster management, coordination. We teach them to work together to protect each other, to respond to crises as a unified whole. And hidden within that training, we include the skills they would need to defend themselves if crisis ever came in the form of invasion. You trained your entire population for combat, said accusingly. We trained our entire population to survive, replied. There is a difference. An army exists to wage war. Our people exist to live their lives, and they happen to know how to fight if they must. We did not build warships because we do not believe in projecting military power, but we built civilian ships that can transform into defensive platforms because we believe in protecting our homes. Counselor Al leaned forward, his scales slowly shifting to a pale blue that indicated deep thought. Ambassador, you are describing a civilization where every person is a potential soldier, every building is a potential fortress, every ship is a potential warship. Yes, said simply. That is not pacifism. That is the most thorough militarization I have ever encountered. It is neither, smiled slightly. It is preparation. We do not want war. We do not seek conflict. We simply recognize that the universe is dangerous, and we chose to be ready. The difference between us and most species in this galaxy is that we do not maintain forces designed to attack others. We maintain a population capable of defending itself. And you hid this from the rest of the galaxy. We did not hide anything. We told everyone exactly what we were. We said we had no military, and that was true. We said we were farmers and scientists and traders, and that was also true. The galaxy simply assumed that meant we were weak. Smile faded. That assumption was your mistake, not our deception. The chamber fell silent again. The delegates looked at each other, at the images still floating on the display, at the small human woman who had just redefined their understanding of warfare. Finally, Al spoke. What do you want, Ambassador Park? You clearly do not need our protection, so why are you here? Took a deep breath. I want what we have always wanted, peace, trade, cooperation. They attacked us and we defended ourselves. We did not pursue their retreating forces. We did not invade their territory. We did not seek revenge. The war is over as far as we are concerned. And if another species were to threaten human territory? His expression did not change, but something in her eyes grew cold. Then 12 billion people across our colonies will receive an emergency alert. They will stop whatever they are doing, pick up whatever tools are nearby, and respond to the crisis. They will do this not because they are ordered to, but because that is what humans do. We take care of each other. We protect our families. And anyone who threatens those families will learn why humanity swore off war. She gathered her documents and prepared to leave. We swore off war because we were too good at it. We nearly destroyed ourselves. We will not make that mistake again. We will not start wars, we will not seek conquest, and we will not build armies designed to hurt others. But we will defend ourselves, always, without hesitation, without mercy. She walked toward the exit, then paused and looked back at the assembled delegates. The thought they were attacking a peaceful farming colony. In a way, they were right. We are peaceful. We are farmers. We are also the most dangerous species in this galaxy when our families are threatened. I hope no one else needs to learn that lesson. Ambassador Park left the chamber. Behind her, the most powerful species in the galaxy sat in stunned silence. High Counselor Al finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Update our records on the human species. Classification, peaceful but extremely dangerous. Threat level, maximum. Recommendation, do not provoke under any circumstances. No one disagreed. Across the galaxy, the word spread. The humans had no army. The humans were farmers and traders and scientists. The humans wanted only peace. And the humans had just destroyed the largest invasion force in 2,000 years, with civilian emergency responders. The galaxy had finally learned what a human army was. It was not an army at all. It was a civilization, a people, a species that had looked into the darkness of its own nature and emerged stronger, more unified, and more terrifying than anything the galaxy had ever imagined. The humans returned to their lives. Farmers went back to their fields. Scientists returned to their laboratories. Traders resumed their routes between the stars. Life continued as it always had. But in every human home, the emergency training continued. Children learned to save lives and work together. Adults practiced skills they hoped never to use. The elderly passed on knowledge to the next generation. And somewhere deep in human space, in a small restaurant on New, grandmother served soup to her granddaughter and smiled. Good soup, said. The best, agreed. Some things are worth fighting for. Outside the window, the purple field stretched to the horizon, peaceful and beautiful. The war was over. Life continued. But humanity was always ready. Always.